I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1, go. 3 years ago, when I was volunteering in India, I visited the slums, which are some of the worst places for people to live in. Literally, like, children taking shit in, like, puddles of mud, pigs running around, no food, no education, no sanitation, horrible conditions. We think that India is a third world country, that many of its citizens suffer from lack of food, from lack of education, from lack of jobs. Therefore, we think the most important thing in the debate today is to explain to you about the economy of India, where they're likely to make the best economic deals, where they're likely to get the most jobs, the most economic growth, to lead them out of staying a third world country, to lead people out of poverty, to give people jobs. I'm going to base my speech mainly on giving you reasons for why we think making more connections, choosing to partner with China is going to be better for their economy than choosing to partner with America. And Avinoam is going to talk to you also about the political effect of this in the long terms. In terms of definition, this means that obviously there are some places where partnering with China and America won't be mutually exclusive. We think that the debate is centered around those places where you have to decide whether you are now going to partner with Huawei or Apple or Alibaba or Amazon. These are the places in which we are making these are the places in which the debate happens. If anyone has clarifications, cool. Let's get into. We're going to bring you 5 mechanisms to why we think the why we think this is going to be better for economic policy in the future. The first thing is just in terms of labor. We think that China is a place where you can have much cheaper labor, much more affordable labor, and also much more open labor. In China, you have much more people that are willing to work for much less time than in the US. In China, you don't have a minimum wage like you have in the US. In China, you have a population that is 3 times the amount of the US, therefore you have accessibility to much more workers. This means that in terms of when you are starting up a new company, when you want new workers, you are more likely to find cheaper labor you're more likely to find cheaper labor in there. Secondly, we think that China already has a niche of technology. They already have a lot of, at least equal to the US, if not, because they are the biggest phone makers in the world. They're the biggest computer makers in the world in the status quo, and if you want to deal with these things, they have the most experience and already control the niche pretty much in the status quo. Secondly, in terms of being close to them geographically, we think that the fact that you can trade with someone that you don't have to pay money for all the planes, you don't have to pay money for all of the shipping, the fact that you can trade with someone that is directly next to you makes a huge difference on the amount of money you're going to have to waste when you start a new company, the amount of money you're going to have to waste to make sure that this partnership can happen when you can trade closely as if you were almost in the same country. It makes a big difference to how much product you can move, to how much product you can make, to how fast you can move this product, and how successful you are going to be. Secondly, in terms of working together, you need, if you're working with someone that's on the other half of the globe, it is much harder for you to be working together because you're literally in different time zones. When Indian people are working, American people are sleeping. This makes it harder for cooperation. Before I get into more mechanisms, I'll take closer.
Yeah, India has lots of phone manufacturers like Reliance and Geotelecom, and its comparative advantage relies on cheap labor. It sounds like the economies are more competitive than complementary.
We think that the fact that they have similar economies is actually something good. We're going to get to that now. We think that the fact that China's economy is very similar to India's economy in terms of the fact that they try to produce things that aren't first rate but are cheap and pretty much as good as what you can get in the US, but 5 times cheaper. For example, phones that are reliable, but they aren't they aren't iPhone 10s. And because these sorts of things, this type of economy is the economy that specifically India wants. Because the customers in India aren't Western civilization customers. They are poor customers that want to buy the knockoffs, that don't have as much money in their pockets to spend. Therefore, the partnering with China, with someone that has a similar economy, is something that is actually helpful to you. Secondly, in answer to Yishai's POI, we don't think that they have the ability to steal jobs, because if India can, in the status quo, hire people domestically, they will obviously opt into doing this because these people give them more taxes and they care about their people first. We're only talking about like partnerships where you anyways are going to have to hire people from different places, and in these instances, we don't think there is an overlap. Fourthly, let's talk about the Belt and Road Initiative. We think that in the long run, China is already came out and said they're willing to put money in other countries, they're willing to put money in developing countries, they're willing to pay for roads, for trains, for means of transportation, for means to move product from place A to place B when they make an economic partnership with another person. The US is much less willing to do this. A, because they're on the other half of the planet, but B, because they don't have the same resources and they don't have the same interests and connections that China has. The fact that we are partnering as India with a country that is willing to pour money into our economy, that is willing to help us move from a third world country to a country that is similar to them, that is strong and that has a good economy, is a huge advantage. But secondly, in terms of experience, China knows how to do this, knows how to, how it's done to itself, to take a shitty country and to turn it into something that is really strong, to mechanize the fact that you have 1 billion people and to use them in the quickest and best way to create a lot of product and economical gain. China understands how to do this versus the US that live in a totally different mindset and don't understand how to use 1 billion people, don't understand the culture barriers between them. Lastly, we think that China's potential to grow in the long term is just much bigger than the US's economy. Assuming that their economies are pretty similar today, even though we think that currently China's economy is probably even stronger, in terms of the future, China has more people, therefore they have more consumers, more customers, more people that want to start new companies. In a partnership in the long run, we think that it is better to be with China because there are more potential buyers. Lastly, let's understand, the policy and the economic partnerships in technology are going to have effects on other partnerships. We think that if we agree to partner with them in technology, we're also going to do that in other brands, in other places, and all the analysis that we give you applies there. For all of these reasons, we beg you to propose.
I thank the speaker very much, and I'm happy to call upon the leader of the opposition to continue the debate.
Three, 2, 1, go. China doesn't have partners. China has victims. And it is ridiculous to expect India to be one of those and then claim it would be good for them. I will have severe amounts of rebuttal. Then we'll talk about A, why we believe that China does only unfair partnerships, and then B, we'll do the cost-benefit analysis and show how India has very little to gain from technological partnerships, but has so much to lose. Before that, one point of framing that is crucial. The entirety of the speech that we just heard was about partnership in general. It was not about technological partnerships. And this is crucial. Why? Because we have no problem in the partnership that you have with China over commodities that happens today. The partnerships that you have over infrastructure like the BNR that happens today and would continue to happen because this is the one big project that China cares about the most, and frankly, probably the entire economy and regime would collapse if the BNR were to fail. So definitely the debate is not there. All the investment would still be there, the cheap commodities would be there, the jobs for people would still be there. The question is what happens to technology specifically. And please notice that specifically about technology, it's ridiculous to say that this would be very important for India. First of all, India has itself a pretty developed technological sector. Bangalore is known as the Silicon Valley of Southeast Asia, so saying that they are not competing there and that they have a lot to gain from China is ridiculous. Secondly, the amount of jobs overall in the tech sector compared to the entirety of India is so slim, it wouldn't nudge what's happening in the 1.3 billion people that is India. And obviously, if they want cheap labor, if as an Indian person you need cheap labor, you use Indian people who are today twice as cheap as using Chinese labor, because China's economy is so much stronger than the Indian. Okay, let's talk therefore about, so that sums up the rebuttal. Let's talk about partnership. Look, China doesn't do partnership, and it's very important to understand in which sense, specifically in the technological area. In tech, the most important thing that you have is the intellectual property, the patent law of your technology. Why? Because in the modern world, technology is very easy to imitate. If it is an algorithm or a software, you just copy it. If it is manufacturing something, since the invention of, say, 3D printing, manufacturing pretty much any sort of technological idea has become a lot easier. So the main thing that can give you an edge as a technology company is to have a patent on something, so you are the only one who can use this specific type of technology. Now, China is notoriously not respectful of IP laws, right? What do? First of all, just a lot of corporate espionage. They literally just steal things with hacking and so on. This is clearly a lot easier to do when you partner with someone and you cooperate with them and they show you their databases and so on, and then it becomes a lot easier to do that. Secondly, they do it with draconic partnerships, where they demand that you give them rights over the IP laws, and they say, oh no, clearly we would do it in a very limited sense, but then they do it all over the world, and you can't really stop them, because what will you do? Sue them? The Chinese courts themselves are also part of China's mechanisms, and they would always support their own citizens and their own corporations. So there is nothing that you can actually do against them. More than that, because the Chinese corporations are simply a front for the Chinese government, they would always push you to just get worse deals. They they won't uphold their own promises if it fails. They would push you to, for example, only hire Chinese workers because that is what benefits them. They would use diplomatic and the Chinese media to have stricter regulation that would make it worse for your company but easier for their companies. This is what they do, and if they are able to do it successfully to big, strong Western countries, Western corporations such as Samsung, it is clearly would be even easier for them to do all of that to India. And for all those reasons, just partnering with them and giving them this ability is ridiculous. Compare that with the US, who cares so much about IP laws. This is part of the main aggression that they have versus China today. They would keep your IP laws. If Amazon sees something good about your technology, they would just buy it, actually, with full money that would inject a lot of capital into the Indian economy. Clearly much better to partner with them. Before I move on, second.
So at your best case scenario, there is a harm to the minute part, as you claim, of the India technological sector. But on our side of the house, we stop the ban that exists today on all of the massive technology companies that China have. This is much bigger.
There is no ban. What the hell are they talking about? Alibaba is selling a lot to India, and even if they weren't, please notice, okay, this gets me just to my next point. So let's talk about what do you gain and what do you have to lose. So first of all, in terms of gaining, please notice you have very little to gain from Chinese technology. Why? Because what India has as a very poor country, they do not have a problem of bad high-tech, which is what you can get from China. They have a problem of low-tech. They have a problem of sanitation, of infrastructure, of commodities. They need cheap products so people can actually buy them even in the weak Indian economy. They have no need for Chinese technology in that sense. Secondly, please notice that in terms of selling to them, as I said, China does not give you fair deals. So whatever you want to sell to China, you get very, very little from it. And this comes at the expense of the future endeavors of the country. It is true that it is a small market today within India compared to the rest of India, but it is also the forefront. This is the future of India, and therefore stifling its development versus China is a terrible idea. So, what do you, however, stand to lose on your side? Please notice, India and China are not at peace. They are competing economies because they both want the investment in technology to pull them away from poverty. They have territorial disputes over their northern border of India. They have increased nationalism on both sides, which means that it is very soon will come the day where this would be used by China against India. In which sense? In the way that they can threaten to fire just workers and destroy technologies, in the sense that they can use your information, because this is technology today. They will just use the information of the Indian people against it, and then you make yourself weaker to hacking, which is done by China. For all those reasons, beg you to oppose.
It's incredibly important to understand that in this debate, what's important isn't the tiny forefront of technology in India. What's important is that Indians are dirt poor and they need to buy technology from China. That is the main part of the partnerships that we're talking about, and when OO miss this, they lose the debate. I'm going to have several pieces of rebuttal to opening opposition, then I'm going to extend a little bit on the case brought to you by the Prime Minister, and then I'm going to possibly give you a point about politics. Okay, cool. So let us begin with our rebuttal. So what Schulman ultimately tells us is that China is mean, China takes away your intellectual property rights, China doesn't behave nicely when you work with them. Here's the problem. This is only applicable in the sense where you are working with China, where Indian workers are coding code for Chinese companies, but it is not applicable when, for example, you are buying phones made in China, you are buying computers made in China, you are having a banking system with advanced banking technologies made by China, or for example, your street lights are run by an algorithm made by a Chinese company. These are things which you need to be cheap, you need to be accessible, and all of India needs these things in order to run smoothly. It's impossible to develop your country without technology, unless, I mean, you could do it the old-fashioned way, but that would take you hundreds of years. You really need this technology really badly. You need to be able to, that every Indian will be able to afford to have their own smartphone. If they're buying Xiaomi or Huawei, that's going to be something that's possible. If they're buying iPhones, that's something which isn't going to be possible. That is what we need in this debate. And we tell you that ultimately, the reason that we're above opening opposition already at this point is because of the weight. Because that for the large majority of Indians, specifically the Indians which are the worst off and which need the most help, what's important is buying this technology, is accessing the technology, not whether the, like, I don't know, 2%, 1% of Indians which like work in coding and now are going to work for Huawei, and it's, I don't know, they're probably working for them. I'm not sure what intellectual property they're actually losing. Now, cool. Aside from that, their claim about intellectual property rights, so it is like a relevant thing in terms of technology companies, but the fact that you can copy another company, like in theory, that you know how their algorithms work, or that you know what they're trying to do, or you know what technologies they use, doesn't mean that you can actually do it. What you need to actually do it is human resources. You need to have people which know coding. You need to have people which understand advanced algorithms.
That is like the type of thing which you simply need to build up, right? Once you have those things, you can build those companies. That is the reason, like, you know, why you have Google and you have Bing, and yet everybody still uses Google, because Google have better coders, have better UI designers, right? That's something which you believe that if you do manage to advance and like just have more people coding in India, that is something which is going to be better. And so we're also beating opening opposition on that claim as well. Let us move on a little bit, talk about, no thank you, talk about all the things which we said. First of all, the main mitigation that we get from opposition, in fact, I think it's the only one, is they tell us, hey, listen, you can still do infrastructure, you can still do other things which aren't technology with China. Two responses to this. Number one, we think that technology is a thing which gets involved in almost all of the aspects of life. True, if you're buying rice, that is something different. That's not technology. But if you want to build infrastructure, if you want to have byproducts, if you want to have working, you know, banking systems or public transportation in your country, you need to have high or low tech, right? You need to have some kind of technology, and we think that that is a major part of this debate. Now, we tell you then, that is the first response, that technology simply takes a very big part. But secondly, we're going to respond and explain specifically why you needed to join on board with China in terms of technology in order for them to want to invest in you more, at least it's going to make some kind of an impact. I'll talk about that in a few minutes. I will not take closing.
Yeah, so when do you think we're likely to get better workers who are more accomplished? When you have China, which can internally have lots of poor workers to give education to, or when you can educate an Indian worker rather than paying a Western worker a very high wage?
Cool. I think that ultimately, like, it's an issue of skill, and so like China has a lot of skilled people, but if India has other skilled people which are going to be able to code better, then you're probably going to take them. India literally has 1 billion people, and we think that it's quite likely that they're going to have significant amount of like untapped potential. We think China is a better placed actor to take out that potential from the Indian people and put it to use. America is used to the system that it has in America. China knows how to deal with the systems we have in India. Cool. So let's extend a little bit the case that we got from Tzvi and like truly explain and give a few more examples, right? We tell you that, first of all, when Tzvi tells you that there's cheaper labor in China, what he's talking about is when you're buying products from China, that means that the things which they produce are cheaper. That's why Chinese phones are cheaper than American phones. Secondly, right, when we're talking about like geography, this is something incredibly important, right? The fact that you have to literally ship all that technology from, you know, the United States all the way to China, that is months shipping it by boat, right? If you want to use a plane, that's incredibly more expensive. For the people in India, every single dollar counts, especially when you're making literally $1 a day. And we tell you that in these types of situations, this can be the deal breaker. This can be what gives an Indian person the potential to have access to a smartphone, the potential to then use that smartphone to advance themselves, to learn new skills, and to become entrenched in the global economy. Okay, cool. Let's talk a little bit about why specifically we need a technological partnership for all the other partnerships. Notice today there's a big fight between America and China. I think this is what this debate is meant to bring out, right? We tell you that this fight isn't like the Cold War. We're not building nuclear weapons, each side as many as possible. What's happening is each side, oh, I only have 7 minutes, cool. Each side, what they do is they try to bolster their own economy sector, be better than the other economy, right? America tries to tell Britain, don't buy your 5G networks from Huawei, take it from us instead. And that is something which is incredibly important to both of these actors. I will tell you that if India joins the bandwagon and comes to China, this is going to be something incredibly important to China. They're going to be willing to take that investment and therefore return help to India in the other things, in terms of building that type of infrastructure. Secondly, though, we tell you that to the extent that China is more involved in terms of technology and is selling more things to India, or also partnering with Indian companies and like hiring Indian workers, this is a world in which China cares more about India, right? This is a world in which China cares more about making sure that there are better roads in India, because if those better roads are going to be helping their high-tech companies. Those better roads are going to be helping their expansion in India, making sure that the Indian people have more money in order to buy Chinese goods. For all these reasons, we beg of you to propose.
I'm going to start in, I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. So again, I want to rebut the ideas and preempt that cooperating with USA over China within the technology thing is not going to hurt the partnership as OG tries to put forward, okay? The idea that we cooperate with the USA is not going to hurt Sin because of 2 reasons. First of all, again, as Schulman told you, China still has interest that the countries around it, okay, are going to be developed because of the Belt and Road. China understood that once the countries around it, okay, are going to be strong enough so they can forward like all the commodities and the things, this is within the interest of them. So even though India does not cooperate with them on the technological part, they still have under interest of them. Second thing, we also think that there are many other countries, okay, in the world that that are partners with China and with other countries, okay? So it's not mutually exclusive. For example, Israel trades with USA and with China as well, and it doesn't hurt. Thus, the question is, which comes here, okay, which is not whether the interest of India about their industry overall are going to hurt, but specifically in technological development, whether or not it should prefer China, okay? I'm going to do one rebuttal, and then I'm going to speak about, first of all, how a country can use technology against you and why it's more within the interest of China rather than USA, and then hopefully I'm going to speak about why specifically the partnership with the USA it's much more better for India. One point of rebuttal beforehand, okay? Again, what they tell us, look, we need all this technology, okay, to be available, to be cheap, okay, and it's much cheaper in China, okay? We agree that Huawei might be cheaper than iPhone, but it is not the question, okay? We think that even today, okay, there are technologies within India which are as cheaper as China's, okay? We have phones within India which are cheaper and they can buy them. They have companies, they have internet companies where people in India can buy, okay? This is not the problem. So we think it even falls into our side, okay, where if China gives you Huawei which is cheaper than the smartphone that they have in India, so they are competitors within this idea. We think that India can afford and produce this low-tech technology. This is not the problem of India, okay? So let's speak about like what happens when China becomes more involved within the technological idea within your country, okay? So first of all, pay attention that Schulman told you, okay? China, the interest of China is just like not to have partners with others, okay? Just want to control like other countries within their technology. Let's pay attention first of all to the first important thing, okay? Once a country knows your and this is okay, and this is important, okay? I'll put it beforehand, okay? China's technology and the government of China are the same thing. It's not like in the USA, okay, where you have Amazon, which is a private company, okay, and you have the USA government, okay, which are different things. Within China, okay, when you give your technological tools to China, it means you give the government, the Chinese government, the information about you. Okay, it means that since China is not a fair partner, okay, they can use your privacy. Okay, this is comparing to the U.S. government, which is not going to use that. Okay. Second thing, okay, once a country knows what your technological tools, it knows all the protection about your infrastructure, about your hospital, etc. Pay attention. We don't talk also only about phones, etc. Okay, which is also something that can go over your privacy, but much more crucial things like when they know what the internet within your infrastructure or the electricity within your hospitals. Okay, but the third thing we want to tell what happens when you use a technology of a country which the companies of this country and the government of the countries are just the same thing, that we think that it's produced dependencies in the long run, which is much, which is worse for India if we really count on them, okay? So just like OG tells us, India needs China so it can count on it, we think this is very bad for India to be counted on the technological things of, on the technological ideas of China, given that you give all your information, for this government. Before I move on, I'll take second for a clear extension. No, thank you. First.
Okay. China has an incentive to behave well. If they have a toxic relationship with the Indian companies, they lose a whole chunk of buyers, millions and millions of people that aren't going to buy from them anymore if they just steal their technology. Please engage with that.
I think that China does it also today, but you cannot really compete. You cannot tell China, okay, I do not cooperate with you, I don't buy anything from you, because China is the second economy in the world, okay? Meaning that you cannot just like that easily ban China within this area. Let's speak a little bit about why the partnership with the US is just better, okay? So we think that China has the interest, like the interest of the idea because of the Belt and Road that still stays, as Schulman told you. Okay, but the USA has other interests within countries which are closer. Second house, last engagement? No. Okay, other interests of the idea because the USA sees a threat within the idea of China from ideological perspective and from economical perspective, and has a lot of sanctions on it. Okay, the way of the USA to cope with this, okay, is to cooperate with close countries and neighbor countries, okay. As they say, they put a lot of emphasis and effort and economical things in Israel because in the Middle East, because it doesn't have any neighbors and any cooperation with the Middle East, okay. So what they are going to do, because they want to cooperate with India. So for example, they are going to buy their technology, okay, more than China, and they are going to respect the contracts that they have, okay. They prefer to put emphasis to put investments, okay, in areas where they don't have like this control, and India can have those benefits, okay, where they can get army technologies, where they can get tools and infrastructure for their hospitals from USA, which wants to have better relationship with India, that doesn't want that China has a total. I didn't have the time to speak why we don't need we have other partnership with China. For all these reasons, please propose.
Can I? In the status quo, India doesn't have peaceful relationship with China. They're literally banning Chinese technology in India. They are banning TikTok from users inside India. They are banning Alibaba from selling in areas and put more limitations on that rather than the American ones. We think that this change of approach is something huge. We're going to explain to you, we think that opening government didn't explain how specifically the technologically is going to change anything, and secondly, didn't explain what exactly are the things that are changing and why they affect directly all of the things that they want to do, like infrastructures, like commodity trade, etc. We're going to explain specifically that by two arguments. First, we're going to explain why it's going to create huge leverage on China in the non-tech cooperations and other things, and why it makes all of the other things that we want that are not directly this cooperation much more plausible and approachable to India. And secondly, how we get much more medical equipment, which is crucial in these days in India, probably more than anything else, and these are our two paths for victory. First, one characterization, one rebuttal. For characterization, we think that the things that are going to happen with this more cooperation, we think that if we are doing more cooperation, it means that we are not banning anymore the Chinese technology and products like we're doing in status quo. Pretty much it means that we give them some leverages over Americans, like lower tariffs and lower regulations, etc. And we think there are probably companies that work between each other in these two states. So the point of rebuttal about the IP case we got from opening opposition. So we think that the big problem here is not dependent on cooperation. We think that even in the status quo, Chinese can take products that are inside of India, they have no direct relation with them, and just copy that and sell it in China. We just think it's completely not mutually exclusive to the debate, and it's just off-clash. But I think that even, moreover, we just think that when we have a direct agreement, just much less likely going to happen. Because when we have an agreement, this is where both sides have something to lose. We are going to say that as Indian, we were not going to copy Chinese IP, and if you're doing so, we already have these relations, going to say that you don't want to destroy these relations by copying our IP, and therefore less likely to do so in the beginning. Let's move to my argument, how we get leverage. So we think that today, we just think that these two countries just go away from each other because of the border clashes, because the ban on TikToks and other technologies, and because of that, they're both very independent economics. Well, we think that now when there's more cooperation between the states, you just get a lot of leverage that is India can demand things. I think that opening up, we just say that because this is important to China, but without actually analyzing why specifically technology is something that is important and give leverage to China. So why it's true? We just think that technology is the most important thing today for China in their growth in international relations. We think that this is the only way of growth. We think that they're not, right now they're not yet the cheap labor around the world. They're getting more and more expensive, and the cheap labor moves to Africa and other states in Asia. Therefore, they need this technology in order to keep this growth that they already have. We think that it's direct clash with the United States, specifically in the motion we're talking about mutually exclusive technology. If they want to compete the United States in the economic level, international level, they need to do it with high technology because this is the main US market. And we think that when India we just think that once they have this relationship with India, we think that they most likely don't want to lose it. They want to keep to sell their technology and share technology with India, which gives them a lot of leverage. We think it's true because they're just billion consumers in India, which they don't want to lose. It's just a huge part of the world economy. And we think that also it's direct clash with the United States. We think that they don't want this market to go to the United States. It's a huge market for them. In the competition, they will prefer them being there over their competitive. So we think, and lastly, we just think that this give up these bans just gives them the leverage, because we don't think it is like that India is going to wake up in the morning and say, oh, we're not banning Chinese technology anymore. They're going to say, okay, we're going to lift the ban on TikTok and on other Chinese technologies if you're doing X, Y, and Z. We think that these things, lifting the bans, secondly, just starting this cooperation, creating dependency between these two states' economy, and three, contradicting the United States. We think all of these things just create huge leverage for India to try to change things, other things between these two states. How does it look like, and what do you think is going to change? We just think that it matters of infrastructures, because we think that, oh, we're completely lied to you. We're saying, oh, they're already investing in infrastructures in India. No, India is not part of the BRI. It's not something that happens in status quo. We think that this is something that is going to change. They're going to invest much more in infrastructure. We think it is true because we think that it's much more likely that India, that is in crucial need for more electricity, more internet infrastructures, more water pipelines. We think that they're much more likely know that China has the professionality on that, and most likely going to ask it as a leverage. We're going to lift the ban on TikTok if you will invest in our infrastructures. We are going to keep on this cooperation with states if you do X and Y and Z. We think that only when they do that, we think that it is much likely that China is actually going to do these things once they have this leverage. So it's extremely important, because we think that just this 5G thing, it's not just it's a huge improvement to people's life. I think that's giving internet to the countryside there. It's just actually giving the ability to do money transfers, the ability to buy products from different states, because now they have access to Alibaba or other places of buying things. I think it means that they have electricity and heat in the winter, in the cold days. I think they have more roads, and the north of India is not completely disconnected from the rest of the state, because a river passes by a few months a year. Now there is actually a bridge that they can move to the city and keep on working all over the city. I think it's literally improving people's life from being isolated from the world to any connection that enables them to have a quality of life. Before I continue, I'll take up top half.
it's unclear why China has the interest to invest in India overall just because they partnered in terms of technology. Compare that with the United States that has this interest, as we've analyzed you, once you turn against China.
So we explain why China has a huge incentive in India, and this is something that is already exists in the status quo, but they can't fulfill it because India is pushing them away, because they are banning the products, because they are not cooperating with the companies and prefer the American ones. Once we are changing that, we think that this is when China can actually fulfill all of these things in improving India. And also, second, we just think that it's leveraged on commodity trade, because we think that when they're lifting the bans and all of these things, it's much more likely to have these other agreements of selling products like agriculture and all other commodities to China. Say, okay, we're going to buy your technology if you're going to buy our bananas or our other things, which is also extremely important in opening opposition's analysis to the economy of the people there. The second argument is the medical equipment, because it's crucial now in India, because they get extremely lack of any medical equipment, specifically in the Delta mutation COVID-19 right there. We think it's much more better to get it from China, because A, they just get the leverage, but secondly, they just have much more equipment to sell. Just think that the Delta COVID is not something that happened in China. Now it happens in the West. The West is not likely to sell their equipment, while China is actually going to do so. And note that it is a tech thing, which is directed to the motions. For these reasons, please propose.
ידעתם שעברה שעה לפני מתי שהפלט התחיל.
וואו.
הטיימר היה... אוקיי. 3, wait, no, 3, 2, 1, and go. OG talks about how we care about the poor people in India getting a better life. CG talks about how you're going to improve infrastructure and China's improve. We think that both of these things can be done on their own right in a much better way once India itself is much better developed and the Indian market is better developed and has much more tools in order to develop itself. We think that you get this a lot more on the Western side and barely at all on the Chinese side, and for that reason we greatly prefer to go to partner with Western technological companies. For that, a bit of extended rebuttal to what we heard now from CG. So firstly, like, CG seem to think that like the BRI is a good thing for India. We think that like, and we think that India has very good reasons for A, not really wanting the BRI, and B, for today doing exactly the things that they say, like not letting TikTok in. The reasons is that TikTok, for example, has tons of backdoors that the Chinese government can use to get to Indian people's phones and privacy and stuff. And we think that like India and China like have a lot of borders or close borders that they are like that interest in the same place, and like that China can be an actually like defense threat to India, and this is what India is scared about. We think that CG is saying like, yeah, India is saying like we don't want to do this now. We think that India should just change their mind, even though none of the things and none of the reasons why China is a threat have actually changed. We also just think that the BRI is just, you know, a really bad idea, right? It's super abusive. China only brings in Chinese workers, so like the India get very few things, and also, you know, lots of debt and stuff, and we think these are bad things. We also just think that like, you know, we think that like Western companies can improve the thing, can also invest in infrastructure, and we also think that like once the Indian economy improves, then they themselves also improve the infrastructure themselves, and we don't understand why China is the only way to do this, especially when they do this so badly. Secondly, about the more medical equipment, they didn't spend a ton of time on it, but A, you get donations from the West, and also if it's something that the West isn't selling you, it sounds like it's not in the motion because you don't have to choose between the West and China. So like, I don't even understand why it's in the motion. Also, I'm not even sure we want Chinese products because like their vaccine, for example, is crap. So just for all these reasons, I just don't really understand why we especially want medical equipment for China when we are getting donations from the West when the West is selling us all different sorts of stuff, and if they're not, it's not an emotion. Okay, cool. Let's talk about our case, why we think the local economy is strong on both sides. We're going to talk about a few things. We're going to talk about workers. We're going to talk about what you actually get and what the Indian companies get, why this is better, and we're going to talk about something else which I forgot, and we'll get to it soon. Okay, cool. So let's talk about workers, right? We think that India is much, the American companies are much more likely to invest in Indian workers and to hire Indian workers than the Chinese companies are. Why is this true? We think that just like the Chinese workers are very similar to those in India, right? They're very cheap, similar, different, like, you know, the levels of education, you have like roughly the same amount of Indians who are educated as Chinese who are educated, and people like who work on the similar jobs. It's very, very similar people. They're huge countries that have similar investments, like, so we think that just like for higher levels and for grunt work, you have very, very similar things in India. We're talking about, no thank you, we're talking about factories, we're talking about tech jobs, we're talking about all these things that OG claims that China is now going to outsource to India and with these companies, and China is going to put in India. We just think that this is highly unlikely. Because the Chinese government has zero reason to prefer the Indian thing. There's no added value that the Indian workers give the Chinese, the Chinese companies compared to what the Chinese workers already have. And B, like just China is something that they're very nationalistic. The government forces Chinese companies to use Chinese workers. This is something that they care a lot about, and this is something we just don't think that they're going to start working. No, thank you. We're starting working with Indian companies when like it's the same, they cost the same and whatever. We think that Western companies that have deals with India have much more interest in order to do this. A, because it's much cheaper labor, and B, because just like the West is trying to outsource anyway to places in the East, and this helps the West choose India specifically over other places in the East because the Indian government is giving them deals, because they're already there, because of all these deals and stuff like that, which means we're more likely to open up a factory in India, and we're more likely to open up tech workers that we go and we train and we teach them and give them jobs, and we teach them how to do their job, and then this is something that we get a lot more on both sides. Okay, secondly, we think that we just get a lot more access to technology, which has something that helps Indian companies in general improve their economy and improve everything. What is this? Just like, let's talk about what this partnership means on both sides, right? We think that you do joint R&D projects, you do white label agreements where you sell your product with other things, you do revenue share agreements, and you teach them how to use their company. And you teach them how to use this technology. You work with them together in order to develop stuff, and you work with them together to do things. You partner with local companies in order to if I've got Amazon Cloud, then you partner with the local Indian cloud company, and you share stuff with them in order to be able to develop together. We think that is just so much better to be doing this with the West because you're going to get, as an Indian company, a lot more out of it. What does this look like? We think that Chinese companies, well, why is this true? We think that just like there's much more better quality stuff, which means you're going to be learning to do stuff a lot better, right? China, in their development, focuses mostly on quantity and price and not on quality, as opposed to the West, which focuses a lot more on quality.
Right.
Western, no thank you. The West puts more focus on innovation, on good quality, on ways to do things, and new ways to do things. And we think that this is also noticed of the things that India doesn't know how to do as well. India knows how to make cheap products in the same way that China knows how to make cheap products. The technological connection with India doesn't help you as much as getting to actually know the West. This helps you for a few things. A, you have better products for the Indian market that you can fit to your local price, and this is critical against OG, but like, no, you're going to have things in the same place. We think that, like Spotify, can send their product at different prices in different countries in the same way that when you're working with an Indian supplier, the Indian supplier will be able to fit the price to the market because otherwise no one's going to buy it. So you're going to get better quality Western products with the local supplier selling them at a much cheaper rate. It might not even be, they might not be dirt cheap things. Yes.
Here's the thing. In the global technology sector, there's a massive shortage of workers. That means that you can't just bring in workers from China because they don't exist. Everybody needs more workers.
We don't agree. We think that China is one of the places that doesn't need more workers. US is the place that does need more workers. China and India have very similar types of workers. We just don't, and there's like, also, like, you talked about how big China is also, right? China is huge. We don't think that they're missing workers, right? Cool, awesome. We think that, what does this mean? A, so you get better products in India. B, you get a better market for Indian companies because you get much more access to the Western companies. Why is this true? Because these markets need better quality. These markets need the good name that you get from working with Amazon, from developing something together with Apple. Because you get used to Western standards, right? So it means that you do more moral worker rights, and you do better environmental stuff that are critical because like people in the West don't buy stuff if you're being immoral. So A, we get a lot more of this moral action, and B, we get you much able to know how to work with Western companies and go and work with Western companies as well, which helps you sell your product at a much higher price in a much better way and get more reach. We think these things are critical because a strong economy gives exactly both the stuff the government's talked about, improve lives everywhere, and makes people get in a better situation. For all these reasons, please oppose.
I thank the speaker very much and I would call the government whip to continue the debate.
3 points in my speech. First of all, what is less relevant to this debate as a whole? Secondly, where do we get more leverage over China? And thirdly, what are the impacts on the actual lives of the Indian people? Because we feel that too many people in this debate have talked in catchphrases but didn't really get to the bottom points. If it's OG telling us cheaper technology, which is obviously a nice thing, but we don't know how much it impacts the lives of the average or poor Indian. Or if it's the oppositions that are talking about privacy, which is also a very nice word, but I don't know why should I care about privacy in the situation where India is. What we have shown you in this debate specifically is direct impact that do change significantly the lives of people through infrastructure, through expanding the economy, through getting better medical supplies in the emergency situation that India is. We think this is crucial and much more important than everything else everything has told us in the debate. Before I go on, just one external point of rebuttal, the rest will be in my first point maybe. CEO has told us that the BRI is obviously bad because, quote, there are Chinese workers and debt. Okay, wow, deep analysis, but let's actually respond to this. First of all, we've never said that we care about Indian workers specifically, we care about the infrastructure done, so it's irrelevant to the situations we care about in India specifically. Secondly, it could be true that sometimes debt is bad, but we think that specifically in the infrastructure projects that could happen within India, that it will cause much more economic development, which will repay the debt like probably 10 times over because of the expansion of the economy because of that. It's true that sometimes the BRI are bad because there is like corruption and Chinese leverage over those countries, but if we have shown you why actually in this case India has more leverage over China, it is more likely that in this case it wouldn't be bad as in the bad examples they might mention. So let's go inside with the point. First of all, what is less relevant to the debate? So first of all, let's talk about OO. What they have told us is there are IP problems, cyber problems, etc. And then there will be privacy leakages and so on. So first of all, we think that as they have told us, the IP is just a small fraction of the Indian economy. Even if it's completely stolen, we don't care as much about this compared to other things. Secondly, we think that all of those points are just not comparative. If China cares about IP, they do have the ability to do cyber attacks on the other side as well. They do have the ability to copy products and just look at how TikTok looks like the Indian TikTok and copy the UX or stuff like that. We don't think this is extremely comparative, and even if it's some delta, we don't think it's a very big delta. And then when they talk about privacy, we don't care about the privacy of the average Indian. If they talk about like secret service stuff, they can encrypt under the telephone lines. We don't think that the fact that the infrastructure is Chinese means they can read everything you say, and even if they do, we don't know why it is more important than rescuing thousands or millions of people from poverty. Then CEO were trying to tell us about the technology sector within India. What are the things they are saying? First of all, Americans will employ more Indian employees as technological sectors. First of all, those relevant people, by OO's case, is a fraction of the people within India. We don't care as much about helping those people as we care of helping the people that don't have access to the main cities and education and stuff like that and can't work in those technological sectors. So if we improve the lives of those people, it is far more important. But then they tell us this is what will create a technological development in the future because it will develop things. They don't understand that the countries today is splitted. There are very rich people who do have very sophisticated high-tech technology and they don't need like this dog walking of like improving over time, and there are very poor people that we care about the most and only can be bettered not by explaining to them how to develop an iPhone, but by building infrastructure, selling food, getting to them basic things that only happen on our side of the house. Therefore, we think it is much less important than the impacts that we are showing you. So where do we get more leverage over China? OG are telling us if we will trade with China with technology, they will give us more infrastructure and stuff like that. OO are then telling them, well, there could be other cooperation. Is a way it does not dependent on the technological sector specifically. The problem is that OG are assertive at that point and don't really respond to those things, therefore show that there is an actual leverage that comes because of the technology and the cooperation won't happen either way. Lior is the only one that actually responds to those things in two major ways. First of all, we talk about the situation today, where we tell you that today there aren't many corporations because of the ban that India has on China. Therefore, China doesn't want to cooperate with India because it feels that India is doing things against the Chinese interest. This is why you see things like building the Belt Road in Sri Lanka, and building a big port in Pakistan, and going around India because they don't cooperate as much with India today. But secondly, Lior tells you why the interest changes. Because first of all, technology is critical to the Chinese interest because it wants to replace the US, and it's the main thing in the 5-year plan for China today, so it will put much impact on India doing this. Secondly, even if the money today is not so big because India is really poor, India has a billion people market that just keeps on rising, and China wants to be a part of this market, therefore it really cares about the technology specifically there, and it gives India a lot of impact and leverage over China. Before I get on to why this leverage is important, I will take a second. So later, let's talk about the impact. So what are OG telling us? There will be cheaper technology. Or then telling them there is already Indian cheaper technology, so we don't see a lot of difference. So in this point, there are two problems with OG's case. First of all, we don't know what the comparative is. And secondly, even if we buy their best case scenario, we don't know why this comparative is extremely important. Why cheaper phones or cheaper technology makes an actual impact on the people they care about. This is where we come in, but before that, second.
Yes, we don't understand why it's actually true that India has that much more leverage than China, when China is very good at making you dependent, when India is just another country for China, and when China is managing without India today. So
great, so India is not just another country, it's a 1.5 billion person country that is just rising and getting less poor. We think it is extremely important, and we think that buying technology over time is something that's uniquely important to China specifically. Okay, so what are the impacts that we've told you about? First of all, leverage to more infrastructure. Those are the things that actually makes people to be able to travel to cities, to get cheaper commodities, to have jobs in other places, to move from villages to other places. Those are the things that gets people out of poverty, and they uniquely happen on our side of the house. Secondly, more buying of commodities from India. Because first of all, you can do the leverage to make China to buy things and lower the tariffs on some things from India in those agreements. But secondly, just the fact that India pays more money to China means that China is rupees, and it needs something to do with those rupees, so it will buy India things that most of them are commodities that helping the common people, like export and import, have to be correlated. But thirdly, we do think that medical equipment is critical, and it is a cooperation regarding technology, so we think it uniquely happens on our side. They tell us there are some donations. We don't think those donations are enough, where people are literally dying in the street because they don't have like a thing to rescue them within hospitals. We think this uniquely helps the problems of the most poor and most vulnerable people within India. This is the most important thing in the debate. Please support.
Okay, I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1. The way I see it, we've won this debate in one main way. I'll think of a second one, hopefully. But I think that we've already won by showing why the Indian economy is going to have access to richer markets, with better tech to create higher margin goods, and improve the human capital within India, all of which allows you to have more people employed in tech, means that these people are going to have higher wages, which means that other people are going to be able to buy better goods, which translates into higher taxes, and people in general in India being richer as this wealth trickles down, meaning that I think this directly engages with a lot of what we get out of CG of, oh, but what about the infrastructure? When India is richer, it builds its own infrastructure. I think that this is going to beat the idea of, oh no, how many people are going to be able to buy an iPhone? Because A, I think that One, we explain this trickles down to other people, and so we think, oh, that a lot of other people are going to be able to buy a lot of the kinds of goods that OG wanted to talk about. But secondly, I think that it's also just going to be, we show why in the long term we are going to create these kinds of goods and are going to be able to create these kinds of goods of a higher quality than what we are able to buy from China, so we are likely to get better goods than what we would get if we buy from China, and why we think that in general the economic welfare of these people, even if they cannot buy an iPhone specifically, allows them to create internal demand that will then be answered, so they will get these kinds of goods, and just the fact that India is wealthier overall is going to be more important for like their daily lives than their ability to buy the iPhone that OG wanted to talk about. There are going to be two clashes. No, thank you. There are going to be two clashes. One, where do we think the general market is improved, and two, where people can access better technology. I'm going to spend a lot less time on the second one because I just weighed it out versus the first one. Before I do that, I do want to do a little bit of rebuttal, because CG get up and they tell us a lot about how we're going to have way more leverage versus China tomorrow, and this means we're going to be able to we're going to be able to build infrastructure that we couldn't build before, and that things are going to be better, blah, blah, blah. Yeah. Number one, I don't understand why the leverage for infrastructure is necessary, right? We've already explained to you why, when there are even a small number of much richer individuals than before who you can take a lot more taxes from, it equals the Indian government being richer and being able to build its own infrastructure. Insofar as there is an interest in building these things, the interest exists on both sides. Secondly, this idea that, oh, tomorrow China is going to buy stuff from India, and so it has the rupee, is symmetrical. That is true of the West. When they buy stuff from India, they have the rupee, so they have interest in buying more stuff from India with that rupee tomorrow. So anything that Igor said about that is symmetrical in that way as well. Then they tell us, but listen, China feels like India is going against its interests today, and this technology is critical for the Chinese advancement. Number one, I think that the US is a significant player who is likely to not see this in a very nice light and be pretty pissed off when India decides to stop working with it. This means that you are taking the chance of trying to work with Chinese companies while coming at the expense of already created partnerships with the West according to their analysis, meaning we already have set agreements with some of these players. We already know how to work with them. We already have the trade routes that we've created, and now we're going to uproot all of that and start trying to build new ones. That sounds like taking a really big chance for something that we're really not clear why we even need, especially when then the US is going to be stuff at us, and we can likely get money from the US because we have the exact leverage they're talking about, that the US doesn't want China to become a world power, doesn't want China to get so strong, doesn't want these people to be a part of the BRI, blah, 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 by threatening to join China and never actually doing it and still prioritizing. Sounds like we still get a lot of money from the US, sounds like we're still going to get donations from the US, all that kind of stuff. Finally, about the poorest of the poor who are dying on the street of COVID, blah, blah, blah. I don't think that China is going to be giving them anything because they can't pay for their own healthcare, and so I don't really understand how much in the debate they are. I'll take POI for closing.
Yeah, still never analyzes why people who work from home for Google and move to the US in 2 years are relevant to this motion, or why having those upper classes is more important than creating more economical development to the poorest in India.
Thank you, because that really explains to me where we weren't clear enough. I think that there are two kinds of employment that we change. Number one is the employment that he just talked about, where I think 2 years of a Google level salary of $80,000, when the average salary in India is like less than like $1 or $2 a day, is probably a significant amount of tax that I can get. But secondly, I think there are going to be a lot of people who Google hire in India and Amazon hire in India and teach them how to use technology within India, because it is worth your while to approach the Indian market, because it's worth your while to have Indian-based people who cost a lot less. So you're not paying them what you pay Google. You're not paying them $80,000 a month, right? You're paying them $5,000. You're paying them $6,000 or whatever, which is still, a lot more than they would be earning otherwise, a lot more than what an Indian company would be able to pay them. And they learn how to use the Western technology because it is worth training them. If it costs me, $50,000 a year to send someone to a university in the US, or I can spend a couple of $1,000s to create a course for an Indian who I'm going to have for 10 years, and he's going to work as a software or a QA person in India for a much lower salary. It is worth my while to teach them how to use this software. It is worth my while to increase the human capital in India from a purely selfish perspective as a technology company. Notice this isn't true of China, where, as Aliza already analyzes, where the government tells you that you need to be focusing internally, where you need to be giving local people more jobs. So you're going to be paying to educate local Chinese people versus local Indian people on the comparative. We think this is exactly where you have a much much larger. Notice this greatly increases OO's impact of the number of people who actually get to work in tech in the first place. But beyond that, no thank you. Beyond that, the second thing we tell you is that also you just get better access. You get access to better tech, better access to better markets, right? When you're selling to the Chinese market, in which a lot of people are poor, the prices you can take are just lower. They don't have as much money to spend. No thank you. I think that on the comparative, when I am selling through Amazon to people in the US, then my comparative advantage of low wages or low prices is much higher, because even if I sell for less money than the average Western company is selling, I am still going to be earning a lot of money relative to India. And this means that from my perspective, I have accessed a much higher margin market where my labor is going to be worth relatively a lot more, increasing the benefit that we see in India from the amount of money that comes in. Finally, we also just have access to much better technology that allows us to create products that are specially designed for the Indian market. Think about what happened with Jio Telecom, right? Facebook wanted to enter into India because there are a billion people who are going to use it and you can advertise to them, or Netflix, which wants to do the similar thing. And what they did was they partnered with local Indian companies like Jio, and they provided this at a fraction of the cost, at a cost that is relevant to the US, to the West, to the Indian market, while providing it in such a way that the Indians can work on the framework of these companies in order to create products that they resell and then see the benefits of. Notice, these companies can't just sell their products today, so this is opening up an entirely new market that is worth their while to do, but we still get higher quality products. This already takes out OG from the debate, because notice we're going to be getting a lot of the kinds of products they're talking about, only they're going to be higher quality without the risk of spyware, without all those kinds of things. So I think that we've pretty clearly won the debate by explaining why the country is going to be rich enough to build its own stuff, and why we don't need that anyway. We beg you to oppose.